What is going on, everyone? My name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this sound. Now this preset is taken directly from the Riddim Revolution pack from Ghost Hack. It is inexpensive, it has a ton of awesome sounds. There is a link to download it in the description below. Now there is a lot going on in this Serum patch, but there is absolutely no post-processing. It is only Serum directly into the master. So before I go into the creation of the patch, I'm just going to show you what I did for both of these two LFOs right here. You can see the kind of shape that I made. This is just going to give us a really smooth modulation. And I have this on half a bar on trigger. And then for LFO2, it's a very similar shape. It has peaks in the exact same places. Just I changed the level and the curve of some of the peaks as well for some extra modulation down the road. That is also on a half a bar on trigger. So these are the two LFOs that we are going to be using. So to start off, turn on oscillator A. You can select Monster 3 from the Spectral tab. And when you pull up Monster 3, it is not going to look like this. What you have to do is you have to go into the Editor tab. You have to go Multis, Squarify, which you cannot see because my face is in the way, but if I move it over, I will show you exactly what it looks like. You are probably very familiar with this right now. It is very, very handy for making Terror Squad bases, but once you squarify it, and then you normalize it using the process normalize right here, you will get this wavetable right there, and it's going to sound very squarey and very dissonant, but we're going to be bringing it back with some other processes. So to start off, bring the octave down 2. We are going to be modulating the level from 0 to 75 with LFO1 right here. We're going to be keeping the wavetable position all the way down, even though we are using a macro here to kind of move around if anyone ever wanted to. But we're just going to keep it all the way down for the tutorial, and we are going to be adding a little bit of bend minus. I brought the bend minus up to around 30, and I brought it down with LFO2. This is just going to be a lot of movement in the wavetable position, which is being modulated by LFO2 as well, and the bend minus, so we're going to get a lot of movement in this one wavetable. We got a nice sound to just start us off with. Next up after that, flip on oscillator B. Now this is the shape that we have for oscillator B. You can ignore the basic shapes too right here, because all you have to do to create this shape is just create a square wave. It's very, very simple. Just create a square wave like this, and then hit this button, and you can see all the square wave harmonics. Then bring this fundamental harmonic down all the way, and there is your shape. That is all we need, just a square wave without the fundamental. And what we are going to be doing in this one is we're going to be dropping it down 2 octaves. We are going to be modulating the level from 0 to about 56 with LFO1 right here. And also, before I forget, I've actually used this macro 1 knob to control how much this level is modulating up. You can see right here, here's the modulation of that level in the matrix. The LFO1 oscillator B volume, and it's going up that much. I just set macro 1 as an aux source, and I set it to around there, so we're getting some of that level feeding back into the sound. But just letting you know that before I forget. And then we have wavetable position doesn't matter because you're probably just going to have this one frame. FM from B I have up a little bit, and that is going to be taking FM from this kind of growly oscillator. That is on 22%, going up 34%. So we're getting a lot more motion there from the FM. That's a big FM sweeping motion. And when I turn oscillator A off, you won't be able to hear it. At least you won't be able to hear the FM. You can hear that kind of square wave sound. That's very clear. But to hear the FM, you have to make sure oscillator A is enabled. I know it's quiet, but you can definitely hear a lot more, like a lot grittier sound coming from Serum than just that sort of squelchy growling thing that we had before. So that just gives us a much more powerful bass, you know, B-A-S-E, to start off our sound. So after that, let's flip on the noise oscillator. I have wind chimes. Wind chimes are very nice for a kind of high metallic layer. So I just modulate the level from 0 up a good bit with LFO1 right here, and that's just going to add to that very, very high end. And after that, flip on the sub. We're doing very basic things with the sub. Direct out level from 0 to 100, down a couple octaves, the usual sub bass deal. You can definitely hear that. It's very, very loud. However, we have to make sure it's loud now because we are going to be making the rest of the things much louder with the filter and the effects. All right, as I said, we're going to be flipping on the filter here, and we are going to be using a Combs filter. Now, Combs filter is really good for creating very dissonant sounds, you know, kind of metallic if you use the resonance a lot. It's very good for Riddim. So what we're going to do here, we have the cutoff at this very specific frequency. It's at the 78 hertz, and it is modulating up 8 with LFO 2 right here. And that is, this Combs filter is going to be affecting oscillator A, B, and the noise oscillator. So pretty much everything except the sub is going through here. And we're going to be modulating the resonance from 0 up a good bit, up like 60. And the resonance is going to give us a really metallic tone. I liked the metallic tone, but I didn't want it hanging around all the time. I bumped the drive up a lot to give it a lot of extra level and saturation. And this is what we have. Now you can hear it's much louder, it has a lot more power, and it sounds a lot more like the sound that I played in the beginning. Now that wraps up this section. Onto the effects section. Now I'll tell you right now, I am using every single one of these effects right here, but that is just what I wanted to do because I was not able to add any post-processing, obviously, because it was in a preset pack. So I just utilized everything I could to make it sound as best as I could. So first off, going to flip on the distortion. This is going to be a down sample, so we're just bit crushing our sound right here. This is a really interesting technique I like to use for pretty much any kind of sound that doesn't have a ton of super powerful high end. What I do is I have the down sample, I keep it fairly low. I start out fairly low, it's at 6%, and I modulate it up like this is when it's going up 25, and it's just going to be whipping back and forth with the sound. And if you want to really hear what this sounds like, I just went to the smooth knob because you can see for the mix I added the smooth knob, so I can turn this down sample like on and off. So with no down sample, it sounds like this. With full down sample, it sounds like this. You can hear that kind of swishing around in the high end. It's really kind of electronic and metallic, but still smooth. So I kind of like that effect. After that, I'm going to flip on a hyperdimension, just doing the basic hyperdimension stuff. I'm sure you all have been through this before. Bump the mix up on the hyper, size down for the dimension, mix up for the dimension, and we get the typical hyperdimension sound. A lot more width there. After that, we can flip on a flanger, and I just turned the mix down. I just kept it down. Anywhere around this area will do. You don't have to mess with anything else. This little bit of flanging will just give it some extra life, a little extra movement. It won't sound exactly the same, like super static every time. It's just a nice addition to a lot of sounds. I use this a lot. After that, we can throw on a phaser, and this is really interesting what I'm doing here with the phaser. I am modulating the mix right here, but for right now, I'm just going to turn it all the way up so you can hear what it is doing. That kind of wet, squelchy sound is achieved by turning the rate all the way up. I turn the frequency down a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And it's just making sure the depth is up a good bit, because when the depth is up, it is going to be different for each of these stereo fields, and you are going to get a much more wet sound versus something like this. You have to make sure the depth is up because that's what's going to make it sound watery. So I really like that sound, but I just mixed it in about somewhere around 30, and I'm modulating it back and forth with LFO 1. So it's just a nice stereo kind of squelchy layer. After that, you can flip on an EQ, and you can see exactly what I'm doing here. It's just really subtle kind of high pass filtering, just accentuating a little bit of the vowel, especially for the multi-band compression. And what I'm doing, let's see, this is the modulation. LFO 2 right here is modulating this high pass filter back and forth right here, doing the typical kind of talking motion. And I bumped the Q factor up a little bit, so we have a little bit of a peak going on just to accentuate the vowel even more. It's not doing that much, but it still is a key part, especially before the multi-band compression, like I said. So now, of course, let's get to that almighty multi-band compression. You can hear we are just pounding through. You can see it's going so high. It is very, very loud now as well. I brought the threshold down a good bit, and I'm actually modulating it down a little bit more with LFO1 right here. And doing this kind of modulation is going to help preserve the dynamic of the sound, even though it is getting crushed by this multiband compression. Just going up and down with the overall modulation is going to help a lot to keep it sounding not just like a flat line, to keep, preserve the dynamics, like I said. So after that, I bumped up the release a little bit, again, to preserve dynamics. And I also brought a little bit of the gain up, as well as boosting the high band right here a little bit. And after that, as you heard, it is very, very loud. And it is actually clipping inside of Serum, so we're going to have to do something about that. Unfortunately, there's really nothing we could use here that we could use as a level. There's nothing we could really use as a volume, or you think there isn't. I am actually using the filter as a volume. What I did was I selected MG low 24, which is just a really, really tight low pass, and I brought it all the way down, so it was cutting every single frequency. And you can tell if I turn the mix all the way up, that nothing is coming through. It's only the sub, which is actually bypassing the effects section. So what we did here was we basically silenced everything, and now we can use a mix, like the mix knob here, as a volume, as a level. So just somewhere around like 60% would be good, just controlling it so it's not clipping. At least it's not clipping nearly as much as it was. All right, next up is a chorus. And what I've done here is, just the usual stuff I would do with a chorus. I have some very tight time variables here. I brought the rate down, the delay 1 down, and the delay 2 down, very low. I also brought the depth down a little bit and made sure there's not a lot of feedback. And what this is going to do, especially if I just flip it on high pass filter and bring it down, is it's going to create a really wide sound. You can hear that super wide chorus effect, and I just want to mix that in right there, just add some more width and, body to the stereo field. So the chorus is a very, very nice way to do that. It sounds very, very clean when you mix it in like this. After that, we're almost done here. We have the delay, and I'm doing what I would normally do, or something very similar to what I would normally do with the delay when I'm making a Riddim sound. If I turn the mix all the way up, this is what it sounds like. Sounds very wide and very metallic. There's a lot of resonance here. And how I do that is I flip it on ping pong. I rolled off the low end with this kind of EQ. You don't have to do that. It's just something I like to do. And I made sure these time variables were very small at 128 with BPM and link on. 128 is a very nice time variable to layer with the original sound. So I brought the feedback up a good bit at like around 65%, because that is what's going to give it that resonant kind of metallic feel. And then just mix it in. You can hear the difference. This is without, and this is with. And finally, the last effect, I have a reverb. This is just a little bit of room reverb right here. Now, normally when you're on Hall, this is what the titles are labeled. This is what every knob is supposed to say. But when we flip it on plate, we have these different things. Sometimes Serum glitches out and you will see the Hall reverb settings on the plate reverb, but you have to ignore those and just remember what the plate normally says. Or you can just do what I do and do a quick flip between both so Serum can refresh. So I have the size down pretty low. It's not a very high size at all. I just wanted a little bit of room verb. And then I brought the pre-delay down all the way. I always do that. That's just personal preference. I don't know why anyone would use pre-delay, but I brought the low cut up a little bit so we're not reverbing all the sub frequencies, and I brought the high cut down to kind of match the low cut, so we're getting most of the high frequencies. It's not as high as this knob usually is. Don't really have to mess with the damp, just found a good spot for it. That might be even just the initial spot. Yep, that's the initial spot, just leave it how it is. And turn the width all the way up. It's extremely important. That width is the difference between this reverb and this reverb. Then mix it in pretty low, let's say somewhere between like 15 and 20 maybe would be good. Maybe a little lower, yeah, around 15. And that's all you really need. Also, I did not mention this before because it did not affect the sound that we were making, but on macro 3, these combs, I have that set to the cutoff of the combs filter right here. Now this is going back and forth, bipolar, which means that 50% of this knob does absolutely nothing. It just keeps it where it is. So I didn't move this. This is right at 50%, so it's not changing anything. But if you, like I had wanted to change it later, I had a little control to be able to do that. All right, so that is the sound. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you are interested in downloading that Riddim Revolution pack that I was talking about, there is a link to the Ghost Hack website where you can buy it right in the description. Thank you guys for sticking around with me to the end of this tutorial, and I will see all of you in the next video. Happy producing.